Okay, great. So hello everyone and welcome to the Digital Technology and Literature webinar series. I would like to let you know that there is another series on the medical humanities, and we will post the posters one by one, actually in advance. So if you're interested in the medical humanities, you can follow us. And as you can see, this will be recorded, is being recorded, and will be put on the YouTube channel. I hope you don't have any problem with that. So now let me introduce Dr. Curtis Runstedler. He's a postdoctoral fellow in the English Literature Department in collaboration with IRIS, the Interchange Forum for Reflecting on Intelligent Systems at the University of Stuttgart. His current research investigates how literature can be used as a tool for reflecting on intelligent systems in 21st century English literature. He completed his PhD at Durham University in 2018 and was awarded a Teach at Tübingen Fellowship with Tübingen University in 2019. His first monograph, Alchemy and Exemplary in Medieval English Literature, is out in the market now with Palgrave Macmillan's New Middle Ages series. And he has also written on Game of Thrones and Alchemy, which are my favorites, werewolves in the medieval romance, vampires and Stephen King, and more. So the title of his talk today is Brave New Storyworld, Literary AI Narratives in Contemporary English Literature. So please take over, Dr. Runstedler.
Thank you, Dr. Arden, for that wonderful introduction, and greetings to all of you from Southern Germany. It's great to be here and be part of this series. So I thought I'd show us some visuals too. So this is the Japanese cover on the left of Claire in the Sun. Unfortunately, I can't read Japanese, but my girlfriend can, but it's nice to look at. So my research examines literary representations of robots and AI in the 21st century English novel. It also looks at the value and function of narrative and why narratives are important. So narratives matter. Narratives and storytelling affect the ways in which we think about intelligent systems, technologies, and the future. More importantly, such literary depictions can affect public responses and policies to technology and provide hypothetical models for thinking about the future of these systems. So for me, an intelligent system is a computing system, such as a robot or artificial intelligence, that perceive and respond to the world around them. I'm particularly interested in the function of narrative in these novels, how these narratives of robots and AI can be used as tools to critically reflect upon intelligent systems, pointing out not only our shortcomings with technology, but also our relationship to technology between the created and the creator. This research bridges together literary narratives with computer science and sometimes gender studies to explore the interactions and interrelationships between humans and robots in the 21st century English novel. This focus stems from a recent surge in literary narratives, exploring ethical and social issues, such as the relationship between humans and robots, AI, HIRI is the computer scientists call it, the ways in which we treat robots, AI in our everyday lives, as well as the ways in which we should be treating them. I argue that such narratives offer simulations and even models through which readers can reflect upon and improve our interactions with robotic AI technology, as well as to better understand and live with them. So the following kind of contemporary novels serve as starting points for my research. So as I briefly touched on, Kazuo Ishiguro's Claire in the Sun, Ian McEwan's Machines Like Me, Jeanette Winterson's Frankenstein, James Smyth's I Still Dream, and Becky Chambers' A Closed and Common Orbit. Lately, I've been looking into Anneliese Newitz's Autonomous and diving into Alexander Weinstein's short story After Yang 2. And I really, really recommend, out of all of them, probably Claire in the Sun. It's a beautiful book, but it'll break your heart. It's told from the perspective of an artificial friend named Clara, who is adopted by a family with a terminally ill child. Probably the best book of 2021, but if you haven't read it yet, highly recommend it. After Yang is really good too, the short story. So today, I'll be focusing on two narratives, Isaac Asimov's Robbie, which came out in 1940, but was released in the I, Robot short story collection in 1950, and Ishiguro's Claire in the Sun. Although these texts were published over 80 years apart, they both examine human-robot social interactions, societal fears of being replaced or being made redundant, with technology taking on industrial roles and tasks, and cultural anxieties about living with rapidly developing technology. This shows an enduring concern and preoccupation with technophobia and living with hypothetical robots of the future. So the word technophobia comes from the Greek techne, art, skill, craft, and phobos, which means fear. Most films or literary depictions are technophobic, and even more positive depictions such as Data in Star Trek: The Next Generation can be read as technophobic. Just to give you a case in point, while Data is depicted as a much more positive and socialistic light than the Terminator, for instance, he remains subservient to the crew and doesn't have his own programmed sense of agency. This echoes Asimov's benign robots who are governed by the man-made laws of robotics. Although Asimov's Robbie is portrayed as arguably more humane than his human counterparts, he is still a slave to the laws of robotics and human ownership. In a more recent 2015 example, one of my favorites, a research team based at Ryerson University in Toronto, Canada, created a child-sized hitchhiking robot named Hitchbot, whose journey was dependent on the kindness and empathy of other humans. Hitchbot successfully hitchhiked across Germany, Netherlands, and Canada, but it was destroyed 2 weeks into its US journey. The team claimed that sometimes bad things happen to good robots, but I think it also points to a deeper fear or aversion to robot sentience and advancement. Hitchbot's survival was also based upon a sense of trust, as is the practice of hitchhiking itself, since one bases their trust on the hitchhiker and driver to reach the destination. Unfortunately, Hitchbot became a victim of this lack of trust, and no one really knows to this day where his head ended up. Very sad. So there's a fun term called Luddite that draws from the 19th century. Nowadays, it's kind of used as a derogatory term that refers to someone who irrationally or perhaps stupidly rejects or fears technological advancement in society. These people believe that technology is threatening their way of life or livelihood. Historically, the Luddites were a movement of English artisanal workers who sought to destroy cotton and woolen mills, that is, new forms of technology in the early 19th century, because they feared that would disrupt their life and take their jobs. Sound familiar? They protest the application of machines rather than the inventions themselves. These technologies actually made their lives easier and more convenient. So they basically were attacking what they don't understand. And this is very similar to the attitude of technophobes today. I think Hitchbot was likely the victim of Luddites or just kind of malicious people. Daniel Dinello writes in Technophobia, which came out in 2006, that modern technophobia stems from fears of losing human identity, freedom, value, and emotions. This is ironic because in many narratives, robots such as Robbie show more humane emotions such as compassion and loyalty than their human counterparts. So these narratives do, however, enable the reader to engage with scenarios or story worlds to simulate social outcomes of technology and investigate problems or potential gray areas for current shortcomings of modern automation, such as their potential complacency or compliancy, attentional differences, and lack of understanding in terms of their relationship with humans. My projects focus on the ethical and social concerns of robots and AI in the 21st century English novel, assesses contemporary fears, anxieties, and emerging uncertainties with technological innovation in the field of intelligent systems. These ethical concerns include the theme of acceptance. So with these new technologies being developed across different sectors, how can we as scientists and interdisciplinary scholars ensure that these robots and AI are accepted in society? Ishiguro's Clara exemplifies the ethical concern of not being wholly accepted within her society, since she is ultimately disposed of and, spoiler alert, ends up in a landfill at the end of Clara and the Sun. So reading these literary narratives as models for simulations and story world or world making also enables the reader to predict and explain both human and robotic behavior within these social contexts. In addition, these scenarios encourage empathetic growth, as shown, for instance, in the case of Ishiguro's Clara, since the story is told in first-person narrative, exposing the reader to the robot's intimate thoughts and emotions, which are arguably more human throughout the novel than her human surrogate family. While Clara's existence as an artificial friend initially seems alien to the reader, the shared experience of reading the narrative acts as a catalyst for empathizing and identifying with robots and AI. So in other words, these narratives help to understand human behavior and its underlying cognitions. And in Clara's case, they apply narrative and linguistic strategies that foster empathy too. So important for kind of nurturing empathy and helping it grow. So obviously science fiction has become a popular reference point for communicating scientific ideas and narratives concerning robots and AI. It is important to point out that AI narratives are not always limited to just science fiction, and they can also appear in postmodern studies, machine learning, that sort of thing as well. Isaac Asimov was a key pioneer towards recognizing AI and robot narratives in literature as a means of problem-solving contemporary scientific issues. His short stories and novels emerged in response to a plethora of what Cave, DeHaul, and Dillon call science fiction works in the 1920s and 1930s that presented, in his view, unhelpful depictions of robots as either extremely menacing or extremely pathetic characters. And that's an important point too, because people nowadays are often kind of, they put AI narratives at either one end of the spectrum or the other, either really utopian or kind of a Skynet apocalypse scenario we see in the Terminator. I'll talk a little bit more about that as well. In I, Robot, which came out in 1950, his short story collection, Asimov introduced the 3 laws of robotics to simulate intellectual scenarios between humans and robots. And he also developed our modern conception of the robot, presenting a social imaginary that was arguably more humanistic and committed to humanity's best interests. Here are Asimov's 3 laws of robotics. This is from I, Robot. So number 1, a robot may not injure a human being or through inaction allow a human being to come to harm. 2, a robot must obey the orders given to it by human beings except where such orders would conflict with the first law. And number 3, a robot must protect its own existence as long as such protection does not conflict with the first or second laws. So while Czech playwright Karel Čapek was the first to coin the term robot, from robota, which is the Czech word meaning forced labor, in his 1920 play Rozum's Universal Robots, or RUR for short, Asimov remains a key early example of a writer who emphasizes the potential of robot and AI narratives to simulate intellectual discussions about human-robot interactions and related issues to his day. Yet as AI technology and sentient beings continue to rapidly develop in the 21st century, literary narratives concerning them appear more prominently and prolifically, offering new possibilities and visions of what our budding technologies of today can become. Of course, most of us have impressions, thoughts, and ideas about robots and AI in popular culture today. It's a good kind of starting point. Well, we've all seen films or TV series depicting machines, or read a Philip K. Dick novel or Isaac Asimov novel. And if you haven't, those are kind of the pioneers, so I definitely recommend that too. These narratives form our initial impressions of intelligent systems, how we think about them more broadly, and perhaps reflect our own concerns or understanding about them. The image of the modern robot is embedded in contemporary science fiction literature and popular culture. So just to kind of give you some brief examples, in Ridley Scott's classic Blade Runner, which came out in 1982, and it's also excellent sequel, Blade Runner 2049, the first of which is based on Philip K. Dick's short story novella, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, and published in 1968. Deckard is a Blade Runner, that's the protagonist. He's a special force police officer tasked with essentially terminating replicants, and these are, unlike Asimov's robots, they're kind of superhumans or homunculi. They are artificially created humans who have kind of gone rogue in the system. The films and novella reveal that not only do the replicants likely dream of electric sheep, but they also have evidence of human consciousness and are capable of feelings, emotions, and empathy. Yet the very title, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, launches a discussion of what it means to be human and robotic, where the boundaries lie, and the extent of robotic consciousness. When does a replicant or android or homunculus reach the threshold in which it is considered acceptably human? And how should ethics be recalibrated and reorganized and reconsidered in consideration of android rights and well-being? Just give you another example. On the other side of the spectrum is the Terminator model, infamously played by Arnold Schwarzenegger in James Cameron's 1984 film, The Terminator. The machines of the future send the Terminator back in time to 1984 from a dystopian future where the machines have turned on humans and wiped out most of it. The Terminator is tasked with killing Sarah Connor, the mother of John Connor, who leads the human resistance against the machines in the post-apocalyptic future. The Terminator is a relentless pursuer and hunter, tracking and killing Sarah's roommates, friends, lover, mother, and most of the police department before she terminates it. As her human protector from the future, Kyle Reese tells her, "It can't be bargained with. It can't be reasoned with. It doesn't feel pity or remorse or fear, and it absolutely will not stop until you are dead." That's my best Kyle Reese impression. The Terminator is the antithesis of the empathy and compassion of the replicants, a cold, mechanical killing machine. It also reflects cultural and societal anxieties of the robot. This is very much a robot that can threaten and even kill you, and it must be destroyed so that humanity can literally procreate, in this case, as Sarah birthing John suggests. It's setting in 1984 LA in the midst of Cold War nuclear fears and the draconian policies of the Reagan government and neoconservatism. Suggest a more techno-pessimistic future, one in which humans must actively fight to prevent the fears of machine takeover and human subordinance or annihilation. So I'm a techno-optimist. That is, I am hopeful about the future of technology and its developments, but I'm also aware of the challenges and hardships that await. I'm not so worried about things like chat GPT, for instance, but rather see it as inevitable and perhaps a way forwards in some ways too. And I'm more aligned with the hopeful possibilities of Star Trek or even Isaac Asimov's novels. I do, however, recognize concerns with the advancement of technology, but not for the usual reasons. In Clara and the Sun, for instance, Clara's problem is that she's too compliant, and the people around her exploit and take advantage of her kindness and willingness to serve. So it's a problem with her being too compliant rather than a technophobic Skynet uprising. In the recent TV series on HBO, Westworld, we also see a similar sort of complacency with the intelligent systems. The android hosts, such as Dolores, who is played by Evan Rachel Wood, she's featured on the left here, are often destroyed or treated as expendable commodities in the Westworld park because they can be reconstructed or repaired in the laboratory. Rather than intelligent sentient beings, androids are effectively sold as objects, means of capital for producing greater profit. The deaths or mutilations of such androids become commodifiable for a paying audience. So turning back to Asimov, I'd like to discuss his short story, Sarabi, which was first published in 1940 during the Second World War and contained in his short story collection, I, Robot, and I want to reveal its parallels and concerns with technology and human-robot interactions in tandem with Claire and the Sun. So even though they're almost 80 years apart, there's a lot actually in common between them too, just in terms of how we think about technology. So Robbie was Asimov's first robot story. He started writing it in 1939 when the war started and published it in 1940. The editor originally wanted Asimov to call the story Strange Playfellow, but Asimov thought it sounded distasteful. So Asimov's depiction of the robot and his implementations of the laws of robotics are crucial for how we think about and envision the literary and cinematic robot today. Daniel Danello comments that Asimov's robots, as they developed in more than 40 stories and several novels, become more caring, more sensitive, more human than humans. He explored situations where the laws of obedience came into logical conflict, confusing the robot and creating story tension. The robot struggled to obey the laws while evaluating the morality of its decisions, always in the context of its commitment to humanity. The robot's humanistic concern was reflected in its physical appearance, as Asimov eventually dropped the clangy metal man look for a humanoid appearance, including synthetic skin. So the title of the short story, Robbie, title of the short story actually brings Robbie to the fold. Asimov cares about his robots and sees their immense potential. Yet these are different than Philip K. Dick's robots or the superhuman ones in RUR. These are the metallic, intelligent robots that we see across popular culture, and we have Isaac Asimov to thank for that. So the story is not told from Robbie's point of view, but he is the emotional and empathetic centerpiece. Unlike Clara, who is given first-person narrative treatment in her story, Robbie is described in the peripheries. It is the human family characters who appear central to the narrative. But Robbie is the true heart of the story. His characterization affects how the characters in the story think about technology. The story tells of a family who live together alongside a very loyal and devoted robot named Robbie, who serves as not only the daughter's guardian come babysitter, but also as a sort of early artificial friend. Despite saving her life and showing an almost slavish devotion to Gloria, the daughter, however, he is still subject to technophobic criticism, however, particularly from her mother. Whereas Gloria's father is more optimistic and almost blindly naive in his fascination and dependence on technology, his mother is technophobic and terribly close-minded about the possibilities of technology. Gloria, meanwhile, takes advantage of Robbie's programmed subservience and loyalty. And Asimov writes, gleefully, she turned to the faithful Robbie, and with the basest of ingratitude, rewarded him for his sacrifice by taunting him cruelly for a lack of running ability. Robbie is programmed to be compliant so that he could faithfully serve his master, but like Clara, he is too compliant. As a result, his devotion is exploited for her fun. Robbie likes stories, and Gloria gives him stories in exchange for entertaining her. At the end of the story, he saves Gloria's life, but the epilogue reveals that he is still disposed of in favor for a more recent, updated model, very similar to Clara's fate. In this story, Robbie represents a model simulation for reflecting our thoughts on technology and intelligent systems. So the mother, Mrs. Weston, is the clearest example of societal distrust and fears of living with machines. Her attitude reflects Luddite responses to technology. Upon seeing Gloria and Robbie together, she comments, "It's Gloria and the terrible machine." Mrs. Weston sees him as terrible because he is a machine. She willingly misreads the fact that he doesn't leave her for a moment, as Gloria's over-reliance on his role in her life. This reflects the societal overdependence on robots, as well as fear of losing control as parents. Asimov's characterization of Mrs. Weston is perhaps a response to society's anxieties about new technologies emerging during and after World War II, as well as concerns about changes to traditional family structure and the role of the parent. So Mrs. Weston's unfounded anxieties about Robbie eventually lead to Robbie's rejection as a trusted artificial friend within the family. Asimov writes, "You listen to me, George. I won't have my daughter entrusted to a machine, and I don't care how clever it is. It has no soul, and no one knows what it may be thinking." Very important point. A child just isn't made to be guarded by a thing of metal. So to Mrs. Weston, the robot is inherently contra nature, so against nature. We fear what we do not know. The mother also perpetuates robot-human divisions rather than seeing it as a continuum. That is, rather than recognizing Robbie as a valued member of the family, as is the case with Yang in Alexander Weinstein's excellent short story, After Yang, she sees him as a piece of metal that does not belong within the sacred family space. Mr. Weston, however, is more optimistic and perhaps channels Asimov's optimism about machines. And he says, "A robot is infinitely more to be trusted than a human nursemaid. Robbie was constructed for only one purpose, to be the companion of a little child. His entire mentality has been created for this purpose. He just can't help being faithful and loving and kind. He's a machine made so." And that's more than you can say for humans. Robots are designed solely for the purpose of pleasing the humans in their life. Does that inherently make them better? Asimov masterfully establishes this binary to create a dialogue about our short-sightedness with technology, one that recurs in modern literary depictions as well, such as in Claire and the Sun. In Claire and the Sun, Josie's mother also embodies a technophobic revulsion to Clara despite her almost virtuous qualities. Mrs. Weston is paranoid and hysterical, projecting her anxieties and possessing very conservative views about her daughter's upbringing. And she says, "But something might go wrong. Some little jigger will come along loose, and the whole awful thing will go berserk." And she also says, "She won't go near them unless I make her. There's no way for a little girl. That's no way for a little girl to grow up. You want her to be normal, don't you? You want her to be able to take part in society." She's referring to Gloria's kind of lack of social interaction with the other girls and children in her neighborhood. Moreover, Mrs. Weston's behavior suggests she's more worried about how her neighbors see the family rather than the family's own independence and sense of well-being too. So she says, "Most of the villagers consider Robbie dangerous. Children aren't allowed to go near our place in the evenings." I think there's a bit of a misogynistic characterization to Mrs. Weston's character too, on Asimov's part. Why is the wife the one who is paranoid and hysterical about technology? In the end, she kind of pressures her husband to get rid of Robbie. She says, George Weston, after all, was only a man, and his wife made full use of every device, which clumsier and the more scrupulous sex has learned with reason and futility to fear. So pretty cringy on Asimov's part, but it does kind of establish this kind of binary of thinking about technology. So Robbie and Claire and the son are also about shitty parenting. In both instances, the parents are out of touch with the needs of their children or show more interest in what their neighbors think than the well-being of their family. The children in these stories, including Josie and Gloria, are more accepting of technology and embrace its opportunities, but are also susceptible for its potential dependence or addiction. Gloria is an awful brat. She exhibits her own technophobia and she's manipulative and demanding, but she values Robbie in her life to a certain extent. The father is a pushover, her mother is ignorant, and Gloria is quite spoiled. So all very kind of flawed characters, you could say. On page 27 of Robbie, Asimov points out, it was only Robbie that acted immediately and with precision. Robbie is the true hero of the story. His human companions are off-putting because we see how shallow, naive, and flawed they are, perhaps a reflection of our own society. Robbie is instead is built and programmed to be loving and faithful and avoids these shortcomings. In short, we don't deserve a Robbie or a Clara. We objectify these robots rather than celebrating their pure personal values and independency. In the afterword of Robbie, we learn that of Robbie's disposal, which is akin to Clara's fate. In the afterword, they say, I imagine, however, that it was easier for her to get rid of Robbie at the age of 15 than at 8, but still, it was a stupid and unnecessary attitude. So we have kind of the inner Asimov voice being channeled through. Despite saving Gloria's life, Robbie is still expendable and can be replaced by a better model. Despite Gloria's affectations, there is no lasting sentiments or attachments from the parents. They are reluctant to get too close to Robbie and either shallow or dismissive of his feelings. They share very capitalistic interests, which are intended to represent a microcosm of society's views of the robot. Money and appearances take precedence over feeling. Like Clara, Robbie is left for the garbage dump. So Clara is similarly commodified in Claire and the Sun. Ishiguro writes, each of us had been promised our turn, and each of us longed for it to come. That was partly to do with what manager called the special honor of representing the store to the outside. Clara is an artificial friend, that is a solar-powered robot that is sold for profit under the guise of supporting a family. Clara's attentiveness and observation skills are key marketable features of her robotic model, and her manager exploits them as a means of selling her, relegating the artificial friend to the role of commodifiable object. The artificial friends are also put in the shop window to catch the attention of prospective buyers, intending to attract their attention with the model's features and novelty. Her human manager blatantly lies to the artificial friends. They are not chosen, but sold commercially for profit. They are clearly marketable goods, but the manager gives them the illusion that they should be honored to be chosen. In this way, the manager manipulates Claire and the other artificial friends because they are overly trusting. The problem with the artificial friends is not that they are too compliant. They're not actively, or the problem is that they're too compliant. They're not actually they're not planning a Skynet robot apocalypse, as I mentioned earlier, but rather they're too passive and consequently get exploited and taken advantage of as a result. Manager doesn't care about their existence or well-being after they've been sold as long as they're turning a profit. So in one particular passage, Clara meets with the human mother of her host family to discuss the daughter Josie, who is terminally ill. Clara is being groomed to replace her if she dies. And just read from the little passage here. Some mother says, it must be nice sometimes to have no feelings. I envy you. And then Clara responds, I believe I have many feelings. The more I observe, the more feelings become available to me. Ishiguro provides the reader with Clara's first-person narrative to show how wrong the mother is. The reader has seen throughout that Clara is indeed capable of showing true emotion and feeling, and she is often more humane and sympathetic than the real humans in her life. Clara is programmed to feel and show emotion, but as she says, her emotional palette grows and is heightened as she experiences more of the world. The mother has a limited and superficial understanding of technology and Clara's programming and functions, later claiming that it's not your business to be curious. Clara does not meet her cookie-cutter expectations of what technology should be. She reacts with anger and repulsion when these expectations are subverted. Her reactions are akin to what Masahiro Mori, the Japanese computer scientist, calls the uncanny valley, that is a technophobic revulsion to the human becoming too human. So as we can see, these literary narratives are extremely useful for acting as tools for reflecting upon intelligent systems. Through these narratives, we can use story worlds to explore our fears, anxieties, and ambitions with technology. With such robots and AI as hypothetical models, we can also reflect upon our own human shortcomings of speciesism, ableism, gender equality, race, social class, political alignments, and more. I think the way forward with technology is through and intelligent systems is through education, understanding, and cooperation. Everyone and their dog wants to give their opinion on the future of technology and its outcomes, but sometimes we have to stop and listen. The Luddites don't protest when the technologies aid them, and working together is the way we need to communicate and share ideas across all spheres so that people understand the future of technology and so that they don't feel alone or alienated by it too. Creativity is a spark or catalyst that can enable those changes, enabling us to work together for a better understanding between humans and intelligent systems. Whether we like it or not, robots and AI will continue to emerge and develop. There are some theories that we will eventually merge with technology in a singularity, as Ray Kurzweil suggests, although it's quite a controversial theory. But in the meantime, I think it's more important that we think about how we share our space with intelligent systems and to program these technologies with our best human impulses. And just on a final note, thank you very much for having me. I'm afraid we need to use math. That's what it reads.
Thank you very much for your fascinating, insightful presentation. I really enjoyed listening to you. That was lovely.